Can we answer the question, who is this? What dead god is this? No, we cannot. At least not with any certainty. And that's for both in-lore and practical out-of-lore reasons. One of the out-of-lore reasons is in the art book. The page on the Astral Plane entry says, our final design settled on a backdrop of bright nebulae and the remains of a dead god as their visual centerpiece. They don't mention this dead god being anyone specific, so I do think that is a strike against this being a god we know. And a lot of discussions online end there. However, I don't think it should. Because while they don't mention anybody specifically in the art book, it doesn't mean they didn't have someone in mind. I don't think they decided on a god and then started drawing, but I also do not believe that means the artist couldn't have had somebody in mind. So, if you are okay with an unhinged investigation, rampant speculation, and earnest appreciation for the environmental story Larian is telling here, stay tuned. If not, hey, hope you have a good day. Oh hey Withers, we're doing a video here. Do you mind, thanks. Right, now let's talk more about why this is not a specific god. The out-of-lore reason is basically Larian hasn't said so, right? In lore, we have to talk a little bit about the Astral Sea. I know a lot of folks here probably aren't lore heads, so I'll explain real quick. The Astral Plane, often called the Astral Sea, is the place between places. It's not quite outer space, but something a little more magical, and dare I say, otherworldly. It is beyond your average time and space. It is barren nothingness. Anything you see here is from somewhere else, and the effects of time cease as you know it, such as creatures in the Astral Plane stop aging and stop going hungry. The Astral Sea also serves as a graveyard of sorts for gods. When a god dies, they end up here and simply float endlessly. Now you might be wondering, how does a god die? Great question. It's a bit of a metaphysical one, but there seems to be only a few ways for a god to truly die. Firstly, the god needs to be killed on its own plane, and to be killed by another god or gods of In essence, a god clings to life until they are forgotten, which is why people conclude that this god is unknowable. The proof of their death is evidence enough that they cannot be known. However, I think this environment tells a different story. If you sit here and listen, you can hear it. The sounds of violence. Explosions, screaming, commands being shouted. With the power of a god and the nature of the Astral Sea, the echoes of violence forever reverberate here. That might be our first clue. I believe this god had a violent end that echoes through the environment here. And now that we are here, let's take a look around, gather more clues, then see if we can't match these up to a D&D deity. Preferably dead, but maybe not. Who knows? Our next point of investigation is probably obvious, the physical form of the body. It's humanoid, featuring what appears to be 4 eyes and a row of pointed teeth. You can also see that it features 4 arms, and it's unknown how many legs. 4 eyes, at least 4 limbs. If we assume 2 legs, we get an insect motif. And if we think there may have been more limbs that are missing, we could point to a spider. For now, let's move on. So what else is around? Let's see. There are waterfalls, trees, and pillars, and if you look over here, a small bridge between 2 rocky structures. You can come over to the gazebo where you talk to the Emperor and see a small water feature. These features are obviously plucked from somewhere else, and I would think likely from the immediate surroundings of where the god died. So that may give us a clue. These likely aren't unique assets, so their specific features might not be able to tell us something, but their general features could. There are also some lootable items in the environment. The first is the Divine Bone Shard, which you can find 3 of these here during your stops in the game. This tells us this likely really is a god, but the Bone Shard itself has little to say in its flavor text, simply giving a sense of awe. But when combined to make the vitriol of Divine Miasma, it says, for some inexplicable reason, it makes you feel safe. This could be a clue to the god's portfolio, potentially a good alignment, or just some statement of divine power, but we'll log it as a clue. The other 2 things you can find here are flora, weave moss and the chasm creeper. The weave moss is said to grow wherever the weave is strong. The chasm creeper can only be found at the edges of expansive chasms. These 2 flora are exclusive to Baldur's Gate 3, but in the game they are found only here and in the Underdark. So we'll log possibly an Underdark connection. Jumping back over to the body, we see a good amount of ornamentation. The most obvious being the crown, which features what appears to be an elongated 4-pointed star at the center, with flowing shapes around it. The bracelets and rings also feature designs, which could just be decorative or could hold much more meaning. I found that one of the rings matches the motif of the crown, with a 4-pointed star and flowing shapes, and that motif appearing on 2 different assets might be significant. One of the rings features this image, which appears to be a sun, and another features this image, that looks intended to be an infinity symbol with what appears to be some sort of vortex on the side. A vortex image also appears on one of the bracelets. The last iconography that interests us is the large disc that the god was holding upon their death. It features a symbol that looks to me like an eye, within the same four-pointed star icon we see in other places. Let's log all this as well. So, we have 3 categories of evidence: the general form of the god, the environment around it, and the iconography left adorned to them. With this, let's try to connect some dots and see if we can't come up with some suspects. Our first set of deities we may want to think about are ones that play a role in the game, and that we know are dead or have died. Those would be the Dead 3 and Karsus. As for the Dead 3, I consider Bane unlikely. None of our clues seem to point to Bane, and while we have seen Myrkul as a floating dead god in other places, there is also a lack of connections. Baal, on the other hand, has some minor connections. Within the art book, you can see some of the mock-ups contained a pattern around their head that sort of matches an avatar of Baal, that is depicted as having knives floating around their head. The Slayer form of Baal also features a reptilian motif with 4 arms and obviously sharp teeth. But I feel like these are stretches, as I think that motif in the art book is more likely meant to be a sun. So I'll categorize Baal as unlikely, with Myrkul and Bane as very unlikely. As for Karsus, I don't think this is him either. We know where the corpse of Karsus' momentary godhood is left, which is on Toril. The form also doesn't match that of a human, though Karsus may have simply gone through a metamorphosis as a result of his folly. The iconography could be explained away by him wanting to mimic Aminator, the Netherese solar deity, but I'm personally charting this down as a no. Speaking of Aminator, or just Aman, he does have some connection with the iconography, namely the sun motifs. The 4-pointed star may be a reference to a sun, and the flowing shapes and triangles as a ray of sunlight. The crown also looks similar to the crown Aman wears in his depiction in Polyhedra number 103. I do think Aman has one of the stronger cases with the sun and star iconography, the crown, and that Aman was dead at one point. Another candidate that might adopt a sun motif is Marduk, who also possesses storms in their portfolio, which would account for the vortex motif that also appears. But what about the Underdark clues? Not very sun godlike. In Brandel, a god of the Underdark killed by Shar that was known to help shepherd his followers through the darkness, could be a candidate. Ganador, another dead Underdark god with an eye motif, could be another. If we accept the spider motif of the form, a number of members of the Drow pantheon could also be candidates. Miska the wolf spider also has a similar theme. But, well, actually, let's go back to the skull, because something is bothering me. These 2 side holes may not be eyes at all. They could be a rather large temporal fenestra, which is just a hole, essentially, in the skull to allow for larger jaw muscles. You see this feature prominently on reptiles, probably most notably dinosaurs and crocodiles, who have relatively large openings. But it can appear on any number of creatures. We humans have a small fenestra, in fact, and this led me to take a closer look at the jaw. The bottom mandible appears to be split in 2. Now I can't be sure this isn't just broken, but perhaps this god lower mandible was made up of 2 pieces. Now without getting too into the weeds, lower mandibles are often made up of multiple fused pieces. Ours evolved to be one whole piece, but you can look at even the crocodile or the monitor and see that its mandibles are quite thinly fused. A close relative to the monitor is the snake, and they never evolved to have a fused lower mandible, so that they may better open their jaws and swallow prey. So, and it's not a coincidence that I keep mentioning reptiles here, because this structure is just giving off reptile. So we need to go back and log that as a clue. 2 eyes and a relatively large temporal fenestra, possibly a split lower mandible. My first inclination is to turn to the lizardfolk deities. Semuanya, patron deity of lizardfolk, whose pragmatic concern with the survival and propagation could account for the domain and sun motif, and can also account for the form. Before Semuanya, Esselis was the prime lizardfolk deity, but we don't know much about them. Both of these seem like they might be a stretch, so, well, maybe it's snakes? Seth, the primary god of Yuan-Ti, at least fairly matches the skeleton in their appearance in the probably long Forgotten Realms Demon Stone. But, no, everything else is a bit of a stretch. So, I am left with nothing. No answers. None at all. Wait, I think I've got it. It was obvious the whole time.
Hast thou considered this is a waste of mortal energy?
Oh, hey Withers. I've been trying to figure out who this dead god might be, but I just can't figure it out. Every time I think I get close to a match, something just refutes it.
When one tries and fails so many times, it is often named madness.
But Withers, it's like this god isn't actually anyone in particular. It's like this question doesn't have an answer at all. Well, anyway, Withers, I think I might have it now. There's this god called Jurgle. Do you know of them? So Jurgle. I failed to mention him earlier because I thought there was no connection. But maybe there is. In the tomb where you first meet Withers, there are symbols that resemble the symbol we saw on one of the rings on the skeletal body. There's another symbol that appears to be replicating a star. And if we accept star and sun symbolism, it is a connection. So maybe this dead god has some connection to Jurgle. Perhaps a reference, or perhaps a dead demigod that served Jurgle. Jurgle has had a few depictions in the past, one being a bug-like visage, so that would match the bug form idea, and there's some connections to those spellweavers who look a lot like bugs or lizards with multiple arms. So maybe Jurgle. You might be thinking, Wiz, this seems like a stretch. But I would say, yes it is. In the end, this is not likely to be anybody we know, nor a reference to anybody. But the story and environment here crafted by Larian deserves attention. The awe and the story of a god we do not know dying likely a violent death makes you feel small. What machinations might this god have had? What good did they do? What evil may they have done? This could be the seed of a story for your own campaign, and that would be pretty cool.